I'm so excited. So excited. Woo! Hello! What's going down? We got vibes. Feel like I'm 9 years in. Go Fever Girls! What's happening? What's good? First day out! Day one, okay! Day one! Year one.
How you feeling?
Feverish. Hey! Excited. Home. 317. Yes! First day! Woo! Good. Ready to go? Year two, here we go. I have a message. Let's get it.
The Indiana Fever spent the entire offseason asking fans to trust the process. Their front office went on a full-scale media tour, with executives and advisors repeating the same carefully crafted message: everything is under control. They insisted the decision to draft Raven Johnson was purely about basketball. They claimed locker room chemistry was stronger than ever. They dismissed every rumor of tension, ego clashes, and internal conflict as nothing more than internet noise. And then training camp opened. Within hours, the narrative collapsed. This is WNBA Pro, where hype gets stripped away and reality takes center stage. Today isn't about box scores or highlight reels. This is about psychology, power dynamics, and the subtle signals that reveal what's really happening behind closed doors. Because what unfolded on day one wasn't just awkward, it was explosive. Let's talk about the moment everyone is replaying, the viral high-five dodge. A split-second interaction that spoke volumes. No words, no statements, just body language. And in professional sports, body language doesn't lie. That one moment shattered the illusion the Fever worked so hard to build. Now add context. This wasn't just any roster move. The front office knowingly paired a controversial rookie with their franchise centerpiece, Caitlin Clark. A player already under immense pressure. A player expected to lead, perform, and carry the future of the franchise. And instead of protecting that foundation, they introduced friction. Then there's head coach Stephanie White and her "we over me" philosophy. On paper, it sounds perfect. In reality, it's becoming a flashpoint. Because when individual brilliance is suppressed in favor of rigid structure, tension builds and we're starting to see cracks. Clark's recent press conference only added fuel to the fire. The word humbled stood out. Not motivated. Not focused. Humbled. That's not confidence, that's pressure. And here's the real concern. This situation is escalating fast. Chemistry issues don't stay contained. They spread. And if this trajectory continues, the unthinkable enters the conversation: a potential trade request. The honeymoon is over. The warning signs are flashing. And the Indiana Fever may already be losing control of their own story.
Here we are. Right here, that's Raven Johnson right there, takes a step back. Blatantly takes a step back. No confusion. That's Raven Johnson. This arm is Caitlin Clark. Watch her come out. Raven Johnson's going to take a step away. No high five with Caitlin Clark. And I can tell you right now, it's already getting ugly on the social media streets out there. It's getting ugly. This gentleman says this is the culture and atmosphere the Fever want to build around Caitlin Clark.
Watch the tape carefully. This is not an optical illusion. This is not a cropped image or a misleading screenshot. This is high-definition video capturing the culture the Indiana Fever have built around Caitlin Clark. Clark extends her arm for a routine high five, something that happens hundreds of times in practice, and Raven Johnson looks directly at her, lowers her head, and physically steps backward to avoid the contact. There's no ambiguity in the movement. No confusion in the timing. It reads as a clear, intentional non-interaction on the very first day of training camp. Now, one moment doesn't define a team. But moments like this don't exist in a vacuum. Either they get amplified by context, expectations, and existing narratives. And that's where things become complicated for the Fever. This isn't just about a missed high five. It's about how quickly a single clip can spiral into competing interpretations. Within hours of the video circulating, social media lit up with conflicting takes, some critical of Johnson, others unfairly redirecting blame toward Clark. That kind of reaction says less about the players themselves and more about the environment surrounding them. And that environment didn't appear overnight. When the Fever made their draft decision, they brought together players whose past competitive moments were already widely discussed. That guaranteed attention. It guaranteed scrutiny. Every glance, every interaction, every pause would be analyzed frame by frame. That's the reality of modern sports coverage, especially when a high-profile star like Clark is involved. The challenge now isn't the clip, it's the narrative built around it. Because when every small interaction is treated like evidence, players stop being athletes and start being symbols in a larger storyline. That creates pressure. It shifts focus away from performance and toward perception. And over time, that can affect confidence, communication, and trust within a team. Meanwhile, head coach Stephanie White stepped to the podium and emphasized a "we over me" philosophy. In theory, that's standard. Most teams promote unity. But philosophies only work when players genuinely buy in and when messaging aligns with what's happening on the court. Right now, the Fever aren't dealing with a single moment. They're dealing with interpretation, expectation, and scrutiny all at once. And how they manage that not just on the court, but in the locker room and in the public eye will define what comes next.
Yeah, I think the message was just we've taken another step. We have to understand what it takes on a daily basis. You know, we're going to continue to put the we over the me. We're going to continue to prioritize the locker room and the chemistry in the locker room and the continuity. And we have to expect more of ourselves on a daily basis. It's about consistency. It's about how we do the work, and it's about putting ourselves in position for success.
Caitlin Clark is just another player for far as she's concerned. She's just another. The fact is, if there is if Stephanie White believes there is a superstar on this team, she believes it is Kelsey Mitchell, not Caitlin Clark. You will never convince me otherwise. You will not convince me otherwise.
Listen closely to the language. We over me. In isolation, it sounds like the ideal philosophy: selfless, team first, disciplined. But basketball doesn't exist in isolation. Context is everything. And the Indiana Fever are not a neutral roster. They are built around one of the most high-impact offensive players in the game, Caitlin Clark. This is where sports psychology comes into play. When a coach emphasizes strict collectivism while managing a heliocentric superstar, it can signal more than just a desire for chemistry. Sometimes, it reflects control. Not necessarily in a negative or malicious sense, but in the sense of structure, hierarchy, and authority. A coach wants the system to remain the anchor, even when a player's individual gravity can reshape everything on the court. Head coach Stephanie White appears to be reinforcing that principle early. Her messaging suggests that no single player will be placed above the system. That approach has historical roots. Many successful coaches have built identities around discipline and balance. But the modern game often bends toward its stars, not away from them. Look at examples across basketball history. Phil Jackson didn't ignore the uniqueness of Michael Jordan. He structured systems that allowed Jordan's dominance to thrive within a team concept. Steve Kerr didn't suppress Stephen Curry. He expanded the entire offensive framework around Curry's gravity. In both cases, the system adapted to elevate the superstar, not restrict them. That's the tension emerging in Indiana. White's philosophy leans toward balance, defensive identity, and shared responsibility. There's logic in that. But if a system becomes too rigid, it can unintentionally limit what makes a generational player special. And when that happens, it creates a subtle internal conflict. Is the team maximizing its greatest strength, or trying to normalize it? There's also the question of roles. With players like Kelsey Mitchell in the mix, distribution of responsibility becomes more complex. Rotations, shot selection, and late-game decisions all communicate priorities, sometimes louder than words. Whether intentional or not, those choices shape how leadership is perceived within the locker room. And then there's Clark's response. Publicly, she remains composed, professional, measured. That's consistent with how elite athletes are trained to handle media pressure. But tone, phrasing, and subtle hesitation can reveal just as much as direct statements. In her early comments about readiness and minute management, there's a careful balance respect for the coaching staff paired with an underlying competitiveness that every superstar carries. This isn't open conflict. Not yet. It's something quieter, a negotiation between system and star, between philosophy and reality. And those situations don't explode overnight, they evolve. The way the Fever manage that evolution, both internally and publicly, will determine whether this becomes a strength or a source of ongoing tension.
Yeah, well, I was talking to Steph a little bit, and I'm the person that doesn't want to sit out a single rep. Like, I want to be in there every single time. Like, I just love competing and I love playing, and none of that has changed, but I think just like being a little bit smarter with my body and understanding what it takes. And I think especially like through camp days, like these days are really long. Like, you're on the court 2.5, 3 hours and putting in a lot of stuff. So, taking care of my body at this point in the season is probably the most important thing. Whether that's recovery, whether that's pre-court treatment, whatever it is, I think it's those type of things. So, but like I said, I mean, I've never really sat on the sidelines before, so it's a very humbling experience and gives me a good perspective on how to be a great teammate and a great leader and show up every single day for them.
I'm the type of player who doesn't want to sit out a single rep. I've never really been on the sidelines before. It's a very humbling experience. Let that last line sit for a second, a very humbling experience. Why is a player like Caitlin Clark one of the most ball-dominant, high-impact offensive engines in the game talking about being humbled on day one of training camp with the Indiana Fever? Especially when she's publicly stated she's healthy, competitive, and eager to be on the floor for every rep. There's a clear tension in that contrast. On one side, Clark is expressing a mindset every elite competitor shares. She wants to play, to lead, to stay in rhythm. On the other side, the coaching staff led by Stephanie White is signaling a more controlled approach, including managing minutes and distributing reps across the roster. Now, there are reasonable basketball explanations for that. Early training camp often involves experimentation. Coaches evaluate combinations, test systems, and manage workload even for healthy players to prepare for a long season. That's standard practice across professional sports. But perception matters. When a high-profile player says something feels humbling, it can be interpreted in multiple ways. It could reflect adjustment stepping into a new system, new teammates, new expectations. Or it could hint at frustration at the natural discomfort that comes when a player used to constant involvement is asked to take a step back, even temporarily. That doesn't automatically mean conflict, but it does create questions. Is this purely strategic pacing? Or is it part of a broader philosophical approach where the system takes priority over individual dominance? The answer likely sits somewhere in between. What's clear is that Clark isn't disengaged, she's competitive, attentive, and vocal about wanting to contribute. And the coaching staff isn't ignoring her talent, they're trying to integrate it within a structure they believe can sustain success. How those two forces align or clash will shape everything that follows.
I think the biggest thing is just making sure that we're mindful of this day one. She doesn't have to be out there every rep. Just being mindful of reps. I think every year that she gets older too, she understands, the cadence is a little bit different. It's not like she has any to go out there and go through everything. I think with her, with Kelsey, with AB, with all of that, just be mindful of getting them in and out. And we need to get other people integrated anyway, so I think it'll give us a good opportunity to do that.
Her approach changed with Kelsey this year after she's...
All right. I'm going to stop it right there. There is so much agenda with Stephanie White that it's the old guard.
She doesn't have to be out there every rep. We need to get other people integrated anyway. That line sounds reasonable on the surface. Rotation building, chemistry work, and shared reps are all standard parts of training camp. But when you apply it to a player like Caitlin Clark on the Indiana Fever, it immediately raises bigger questions about priorities, philosophy, and direction. Because Clark isn't just another guard in the rotation, she's a primary engine. A player whose impact with the ball shapes spacing, tempo, and decision-making for everyone else on the floor. So when her reps are reduced while other ball handlers are emphasized, it doesn't just look like standard integration, it looks like an intentional shift in structure. Head coach Stephanie White has pointed to load management and long-term durability. That's a common explanation across professional sports. But critics see a different layer, a deliberate effort to expand responsibilities for other guards like Raven Johnson and Natasha Cloud or similar backcourt options, giving them opportunities to initiate offense and develop within the system. From a coaching perspective, that approach isn't unusual. Building multiple playmaking options can make a team more adaptable over a long season. But the tension arises when that approach appears to come at the expense of maximizing a singular, elite strength. This is where philosophy becomes the focal point. If the system is built on balance, defense, and shared creation, then distributing reps makes sense. But if the team's greatest advantage is a high-usage, high-impact creator, then limiting that player even temporarily can feel counterintuitive. It creates a perception that the system is being prioritized over the superstar rather than built around her. And perception, especially in today's media environment, shapes everything. When fans and analysts begin to interpret decisions as restrictive rather than strategic, narratives escalate quickly. What might internally be viewed as development or experimentation can externally be framed as limitation or misalignment. That doesn't automatically mean there's conflict, but it does mean expectations are colliding. Then comes the bigger question: sustainability. Can a system-first approach coexist with a player whose style naturally centralizes the offense? Many teams have found ways to balance both, but it requires constant adjustment, clear communication, and trust from all sides. If that balance isn't found, speculation grows. Trade discussions, role debates, and long-term fit all become part of the conversation even if they're not rooted in immediate reality. That's the nature of high-profile teams built around star players. At the same time, it's important to recognize that early training camp rarely reflects the final product. Rotations evolve. Roles shift. What looks like a limitation in April can become a strength by mid-season if properly aligned. Still, the stakes are clear. The Fever have a valuable opportunity to build a system that both supports depth and fully leverages a unique offensive talent. Doing one without the other risks leaving potential on the table. For fans, the key isn't to jump to conclusions but to watch closely. How often is Clark initiating offense? How are late-game situations handled? Are adjustments being made as the season progresses? Those answers will reveal far more than any single quote or clip. Because ultimately, success won't be defined by philosophy alone, it will be defined by execution, results, and whether the system and the star can elevate each other rather than compete for control.